There was a time when a man's word meant everything, when a husband stood in front of his family and spoke with respect, with honor, with the kind of love that didn't need to tear someone down to feel powerful. But what happened on this episode of Family Feud would test every belief you have about marriage, about loyalty, and about what happens when a man forgets the value of the woman standing right beside him. When a husband looked at his wife on national television and told her she wasn't worth his time, Steve Harvey didn't just react. He shut the entire game down. He walked away from the podium, and he did something that had never been done in the history of Family Feud. He refused to continue until the husband made it right. What happened in the next 10 minutes changed two lives forever and reminded every single person watching that love without respect is not love at all. If you believe that every woman deserves to be treated with dignity, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel right now. Because what Steve Harvey does in this video is something the world needs to see. Angela Warren was 41 years old. She was a night shift nurse at a hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, and she had been working that same shift for 12 straight years. Not because she wanted to, because it was the only way to make the schedule work. Her husband, Derek Warren, worked days as a warehouse supervisor, and somebody had to be home when their two boys, 13-year-old Isaiah and 9-year-old Elijah, got back from school. So Angela worked from 7 at night to 7 in the morning, came home, made breakfast for the boys, drove them to school, slept for maybe 4 hours, picked them up, helped with homework, made dinner, and then went back to the hospital to do it all over again. She had been running on fumes for years, and nobody in her family seemed to notice. Angela had married Derek when she was 23 years old. They had met at a church barbecue in the summer of 2006, and Derek had swept her off her feet. He was tall, good-looking, and had the kind of easy confidence that made everyone want to be around him. He told Angela she was the most incredible woman he had ever met. He told her she was going to change the world. He told her he would spend the rest of his life making sure she never had to struggle. Those promises had kept Angela warm through a lot of cold nights. But promises don't pay bills, and words without action are just noise. Over the years, Derek settled into a comfortable routine that revolved almost entirely around himself. He worked his shift at the warehouse, came home, ate whatever Angela had prepared, watched television or played video games, and went to bed. He didn't help with the boys' homework. He didn't go to parent-teacher conferences. He didn't do laundry or clean the kitchen or take the kids to their basketball practices. When Angela asked for help, Derek would say he was tired from work. When she pointed out that she was working the same number of hours, plus handling everything at home, he would wave her off and say she was exaggerating. And his favorite phrase, the one that cut Angela deeper than anything else, was the one he used whenever she tried to have a real conversation about their marriage. He would look at her with that dismissive expression that she had come to dread and say, "Angela, I don't have time for this." Over the years, that phrase became more than words. It became a wall. Every time Angela tried to talk about how exhausted she was, he didn't have time. Every time she asked him to come to one of Isaiah's basketball games, he didn't have time. Every time she suggested they go on a date night, or take a family vacation, or just sit on the porch and talk like they used to, Derek Warren did not have time. And slowly, painfully, Angela began to understand what that really meant. It wasn't that he didn't have time. It was that she wasn't worth his time. He just hadn't said it out loud yet. Their sons felt it too. Isaiah, the older boy, had started pulling away from his father. He stopped asking Derek to come to his games because the answer was always the same. He stopped telling him about his day because Derek never looked up from his phone long enough to listen. Isaiah had started spending more time at his friend Marcus's house, where Marcus's father coached their basketball team, helped with homework, and actually sat at the dinner table and asked questions about their lives. Angela could see her son finding in another man's home what he couldn't find in his own, and it broke her heart in a way she couldn't describe. Little Elijah handled it differently. He worshipped his father. He followed Derek around the house like a shadow, trying to get his attention, showing him drawings, telling him jokes, asking him to play catch in the backyard. And Derek would give him 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, always with one eye on the television, always making Elijah feel like he was being tolerated instead of treasured. Angela would watch this from the kitchen doorway and grip the counter so hard her knuckles turned white, because she wanted to scream, but she knew that screaming would only make it worse. When Angela's sister Denise suggested they apply for Family Feud, Angela almost said no. She couldn't imagine spending an entire day with Derek in front of cameras, pretending to be a happy family. But Denise pushed hard. She said it would be good for the boys, that it would give them a memory they could hold on to, and it was the boys that changed Angela's mind. Isaiah needed to see his parents do something together. Elijah needed a day where his father was present. So Angela agreed. She filled out the application, arranged for time off from the hospital, and convinced Derek to participate by telling him there was a chance to win $20,000. Money was the one thing that always got Derek's attention. The Warren family arrived at the Family Feud studio in Atlanta on a Friday afternoon. Angela had brought her sister Denise, Derek's brother Curtis, and she had fought to include Isaiah as their fifth family member, even though he was only 13 and clearly nervous about being on television. She wanted her son to be part of something with his family. She wanted him to feel included. Derek had wanted to bring his buddy Ray instead, but Angela held firm on this one. Isaiah was playing. That was final. They were matched against the Thompson family from Birmingham, Alabama, a group of 5 cousins who were loud, hilarious, and clearly born entertainers. The Thompsons had matching t-shirts that said, "Thompson Time," and they had a whole choreographed entrance that made the audience go wild. The Warren family walked out quietly by comparison. Angela was wearing a yellow dress that Denise had helped her pick out. She had gotten her hair done for the first time in months. She looked beautiful, and when Steve Harvey greeted her, he told her so. "Mom, you are looking lovely today." Angela smiled so wide that Denise had to look away because she knew how long it had been since anyone had complimented her sister. Derek didn't say a word about how she looked. He hadn't even noticed. The first round went to the Thompsons. Derek had been at the podium for the face-off and gave a confidently wrong answer that lost them the round before it even started. He laughed it off, but Angela could see the irritation building. Derek hated losing. He especially hated losing when he felt like it was his fault, which meant he would find someone else to blame before the day was over. The second round was better. Denise gave a great answer that won the face-off, and the Warren family managed to clear the board. Isaiah even contributed an answer that landed in the number 3 spot, and the audience cheered for him. The boy's face lit up like a Christmas tree, and he immediately looked at his father for approval. Derek gave him a quick thumbs up without really looking at him, and Isaiah's smile dimmed just slightly. Angela saw it. She always saw it. By the third round, the game was tied, and the tension was building. This was the pivotal moment, the round that would likely determine which family went to Fast Money. Angela was at the podium for the face-off against one of the Thompson cousins. The question was, name something a wife does that her husband doesn't appreciate enough. Angela hit the buzzer first and without a single moment of hesitation said, "Everything." The board lit up. Number 1 answer. The audience roared. Steve Harvey pointed at her with both hands and shouted, "Survey says she does everything and he don't appreciate none of it." The crowd was on their feet. Angela turned back to her family beaming. Denise was jumping up and down. Curtis was clapping. Isaiah was cheering, and Derek was standing with his arms crossed, his jaw tight, staring at the floor. He didn't clap, he didn't smile, he didn't even look at his wife in her moment of triumph, because he knew that answer wasn't random. He knew exactly who she was talking about. The Warren family went on to win the round, and then they won the final round too. They were going to Fast Money. The studio was electric. Angela was glowing. This was the first time in years that she had felt like she mattered, like she was part of something, like people actually saw her. Steve Harvey was hyping up the family, the audience was cheering, and for a brief, beautiful moment, Angela Warren felt like herself again. And then Derek opened his mouth. It happened during a brief pause while the production team set up for Fast Money. Steve Harvey was chatting with the family, keeping the energy up the way he always does. He turned to Derek and said something casual and lighthearted. Derek, your wife just dominated out there, man. She carried this team. You must be proud. Derek rolled his eyes, on camera, in front of the audience, in front of his sons, and he said, "Proud of what?" She got one answer right, Steve. Let's not act like she cured cancer. A few people in the audience laughed nervously, but most didn't. Steve Harvey's smile flickered. He tried to move past it with a joke, saying, "Hey man, she got the #1 answer. That's your queen right there." That's when Derek said it. The words that would define this episode and echo across the internet for months to come. He looked at Steve, shrugged, and said, "Steve, to be honest with you, I love my wife, but she's not worth my time half the time. She's always complaining, always nagging, always wanting something. A man gets tired." The studio went cold, not quiet, cold, like the air itself had changed temperature. Angela stood 3 feet from her husband, her yellow dress suddenly feeling like armor that wasn't thick enough. She didn't move, she didn't react. She just looked at Derek with an expression that anyone who has ever been deeply hurt by someone they love would recognize instantly. It was the look of a woman who had suspected the truth for years and had just heard it confirmed in front of the entire world. Her son Isaiah took one step backward. Elijah, who had been sitting in the family section, looked down at his shoes. Steve Harvey set his cue cards on the podium. He unbuttoned his suit jacket. And he did something that the production team had never seen him do in all his years on the show. He stepped completely away from the host position, walked to the center of the stage, and raised both hands toward the audience, signaling for absolute silence. "Stop the game," he said. "We're not playing right now. This is not a game show moment. This is a life moment, and I refuse to let it pass." The audience was completely still. The cameras were rolling. The producers in the control room later said they held their breath because they had no idea what Steve Harvey was about to do, but they knew better than to cut away. This was the kind of moment that only happens when something real breaks through the entertainment. Steve walked slowly toward Derek. Not aggressively, not with anger, but with the heavy, deliberate steps of a man who had something important to say and was going to take his time saying it. He stopped about 4 feet from Derek and looked him directly in the eyes. "Derek, I want to ask you a question, and I want you to think before you answer. Do you know what that woman does for you?" Derek started to respond, but Steve cut him off with a raised hand. "No, don't answer yet, because I don't think you know. I think you know, but you don't." Steve turned to Angela. "Angela, what time do you get off work in the morning?" Angela's voice was quiet. 7. "And what do you do when you get home?" "I make breakfast for the boys, pack their lunches, drive them to school, and then I try to sleep for a few hours. Then I pick them up, help with homework, cook dinner, clean up, and go back to the hospital." "How long have you been doing this?" 12 years. Steve turned back to Derek. 12 years, Derek. 12 years that woman has been working all night, running your house all day, raising your sons, feeding your family, and showing up for everyone without a single complaint, and you just told millions of people that she's not worth your time. Derek's face had changed. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something that looked like the beginning of understanding, or maybe just the beginning of shame. "Steve, I didn't mean it like that," he said. But Steve wasn't finished. "Let me tell you what not worth my time really means, Derek. It means that you've decided that the most selfless person in your life is less important than your television, your phone, your comfort, and your ego. It means you've been taking 12 years of sacrifice and treating it like it's owed to you. It means your wife has been pouring everything she has into your family while you sit there and collect the benefits like it's a subscription service. That's what not worth my time means." The audience erupted. People were on their feet, clapping, shouting, some of them crying. Several women in the audience were pointing at the stage and nodding with an intensity that made it clear they had lived this exact experience. Steve let the applause continue for several seconds before raising his hand again. Then Steve did something that no host had ever done on Family Feud. He turned to Derek and said, "We are not continuing this game until you apologize to your wife. Right here, right now, not a TV apology, not something you think sounds good for the cameras. A real apology. Because that woman standing right there has earned at least that much from you." The audience gasped. Derek looked at Steve, then at the cameras, then at the audience. For a moment it seemed like he might refuse, like his pride might be stronger than the moment. But then something happened that nobody expected. Isaiah stepped forward. Angela's 13-year-old son walked out from the family area and stood next to his mother. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking at his father with an expression far too old for a boy his age. It was the look of a son who had been watching, who had been learning, and who had been silently deciding what kind of man he wanted to become, and it was clear that he was choosing to stand with his mother. That broke Derek. Whatever wall he had built around himself, whatever defense mechanism had allowed him to dismiss his wife's feelings for years, it crumbled when his son walked across that stage. Derek's shoulders dropped. His eyes filled with tears. And for the first time in longer than Angela could remember, she saw the man she had married standing in front of her. Derek walked over to Angela. The entire studio held its breath. He stood in front of her and tried to speak, but the words didn't come right away. He opened his mouth twice before anything came out, and when it did, it wasn't polished. It wasn't rehearsed. It was raw and broken and real. "Angela, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I said. I'm sorry for what I've been. You are worth my time. You've always been worth my time. I just stopped acting like it, and I don't know why, and I don't have an excuse. You work harder than anyone I know. You love our boys better than I do. You hold everything together, and I just sit there and let you. That's not a husband. That's not even a man, and I'm sorry." Angela looked at her husband. She didn't rush into his arms. She didn't collapse in tears. She stood there in her yellow dress, with her son beside her and her sister behind her, and a studio full of strangers who had just witnessed the most honest moment of her marriage, and she said 2 words. "Prove it." The audience went absolutely wild. Steve Harvey stepped back and put his hands over his heart. He looked at Angela with an expression of pure respect and said, "That's the strongest thing I've ever heard anyone say on this stage." She didn't say it's okay. She didn't say she forgives you. She said prove it. And Derek, if you're smart, you'll spend the rest of your life doing exactly that. Isaiah, still standing next to his mother, reached over and took her hand. Angela looked down at her son and gave him a small nod, the kind of silent communication that only exists between a parent and child who have weathered storms together. It said, "We're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. After a long production break, the game resumed. Angela played fast money and scored an impressive 164 points on her own. Combined with Derek's earlier score of 126, the Warren family won 20,000. But nobody was talking about the money. The audience gave Angela the longest standing ovation in the history of that season's tapings. She stood at the podium, holding her family's check, and for the first time all day she let herself cry, not because of the money, because someone had finally told her she mattered. When the episode aired 6 weeks later, it became the most watched Family Feud episode of the entire year. The clip of Steve Harvey stopping the game and demanding an apology was viewed over 120 million times across all platforms within the first 2 weeks. It was translated into dozens of languages. It was shared on every social media platform that existed. But it wasn't Steve's speech that people shared the most. It was Angela's response. Prove it. Those 2 words became a movement. Women posted it on their social media profiles. Relationship counselors used it in sessions. Someone made bumper stickers. A graphic designer in Atlanta created a print of Angela in her yellow dress with the words, "Prove it," in gold lettering, and it sold thousands of copies, with proceeds going to a domestic abuse shelter. The impact on the Warren family was immediate and complicated. Derek later said in an interview that the most difficult part wasn't being called out by Steve Harvey in front of millions of people. The most difficult part was the car ride home, sitting in silence with Angela and the boys while the weight of everything he had said and everything he had failed to do pressed down on him like concrete. He said he didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Angela got ready for her shift at the hospital, and he realized that she was going to walk out that door and spend 12 hours saving other people's lives, and he hadn't even asked her how her day was in months, maybe years. Derek enrolled in marriage counseling the following week. He went alone for the first 3 sessions because Angela wasn't ready to sit in a room with him and talk about feelings she had been burying for over a decade. The therapist told Derek something that stuck with him. She said that apologizing was like tearing down a wall, but rebuilding trust was like building a house. The apology takes 5 minutes. The rebuilding takes years. Derek committed to the process. He started waking up before Angela got home from her shift, so that breakfast was made when she walked through the door. He started going to Isaiah's basketball games, every single one, sitting in the bleachers and cheering like he was watching the NBA Finals. He started playing catch with Elijah in the backyard without being asked, without looking at his phone, without checking the time. Angela watched all of this carefully. She didn't trust it at first. She had seen too many temporary changes to believe that this one would last. But weeks turned into months, and months turned into something she hadn't felt in a very long time. It felt like the man she had married at 23 was slowly finding his way back. Not the charming, effortless version of Derek that had swept her off her feet. Something better than that. A humbled, intentional version of Derek who understood that love was not a feeling but a daily decision to show up for the people who needed you. Angela joined Derek in counseling 4 months after the episode aired. Their therapist later said, without revealing private details, that the Warrens' case was one of the most rewarding she had ever worked on because both partners were willing to do the uncomfortable work of confronting patterns that had been set in stone for years. Angela had to learn how to express her needs instead of silently absorbing neglect. Derek had to learn that his wife's requests for his time and attention were not attacks on his freedom, but invitations to be part of his own family. Steve Harvey featured the Warren family in a follow-up segment 8 months after the original episode. When Angela walked out on stage in the same yellow dress, the audience gave her a 2-minute standing ovation before she even said a word. Steve asked her how things were going. Angela looked at Derek, then back at Steve, and said, "He's proving it." The audience erupted. Derek, sitting in the family section this time, wiped his eyes and nodded. He didn't try to speak. He didn't try to make it about himself. He just let his wife have her moment, which was perhaps the most meaningful change of all. Isaiah, who was now 14, had agreed to come back for the follow-up. When Steve asked him how his dad was doing, Isaiah paused for a long time before answering. Then he said, "He came to every game this season, every single one. He even learned the rules." The audience laughed, and so did Derek. But Isaiah wasn't finished. "My dad made a mistake on this show. But he didn't run from it. He's fixing it, and that taught me more about being a man than anything else ever could." Steve Harvey had to take a moment after that. He turned away from the cameras, took off his glasses, and collected himself before turning back. "Young man," he said to Isaiah, "you just preached a better sermon than I've ever given." The $20,000 at Angela won on Family Feud went into a college fund for Isaiah and Elijah. But the real financial change came from the exposure. Angela was invited to speak at nursing conferences about work, life balance, and the invisible labor that women carry in their households. She became an unexpected advocate for nurses working night shifts, pushing for better scheduling policies and support systems. A healthcare nonprofit offered her a position coordinating family support services, which meant she could finally leave the night shift after 12 years. On her last overnight shift, the hospital staff threw her a party at 3 in the morning, and Derek was there. He had set an alarm, driven to the hospital at 2:30, and was waiting in the break room with flowers when she walked in. Angela later said that moment meant more to her than anything that happened on television. The story of what happened on that Family Feud stage traveled far beyond the Warren family. Marriage counselors across the country reported an increase in men seeking individual therapy in the months following the episode. Several therapists credited Angela's "prove it" moment with giving men a concrete and achievable framework for change. It wasn't about grand gestures. It wasn't about buying forgiveness with gifts or vacations. It was about showing up, day after day, and doing the work that proves love isn't just something you say, it's something you do. Steve Harvey spoke about the Warren episode in several interviews over the following year. He He said it was one of the 3 most important moments of his entire television career. He described it as the day he realized that his platform wasn't just for entertainment but for intervention. Sometimes God puts you in a position to say what needs to be said to the person who needs to hear it at exactly the right moment, Steve said. That day with Derek and Angela was one of those moments. I didn't plan it. I just felt it, and I followed it, and it led somewhere that mattered. 3 years later, Angela and Derek Warren renewed their vows in a small ceremony at their church in Memphis. Isaiah served as best man. Elijah was the ring bearer. Denise stood beside her sister as maid of honor, crying before the ceremony even started. The guest list was small, just family and close friends. No cameras, no audience, just 2 people who had been broken in public choosing to rebuild in private. Derek's vows were simple. He said, "Angela, you told me to prove it. I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing exactly that. Not because Steve Harvey told me to, not because the world was watching. Because you are worth every second of every minute of every day I have left. And I am sorry it took me so long to see what was standing right in front of me." And that is the real story. Not the game show moment. Not the viral clip. Not the standing ovations or the social media posts. The real story is a woman who stood her ground and said 2 words that changed her marriage, her family, and millions of lives she will never even know about. The real story is a man who heard those words and chose to answer them not with promises but with action. And the real story is a 13-year-old boy who watched his father fall and then watched his father get back up and learned that being a man doesn't mean being perfect. It means being willing to change. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that the people who love us the most are often the ones we take for granted the most, then subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere right now, there is a woman working a night shift who hasn't been told she matters. And somewhere right now, there is a man who still has time to prove that she does.